Coming up on Bridge City News, the largest summer festival in our city has been cancelled. Officials in Lethbridge made the announcement that there will be no whoop-up days this year due to COVID-19. We hear from Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder, who explains how Ottawa needs to better support our energy sector. And the First Nations teen charged in the shooting of a German tourist 2 years ago receives his sentence.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. First, it was the Calgary Stampede, and now the Whoop Up Days Family Festival in Lethbridge has been cancelled due to COVID-19. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Henshaw, announced a ban on large gatherings, including festivals. Exhibition Park CEO Rudy Friesen said this in a statement earlier today. The Alberta Health Services decision is one that we fully support, as it is in the best interest of the health and safety of the residents of our community. Even though we're in the business of mass gatherings, now is not the time. Ainsley O'Reilly has more on what the cancellation of Whoop Up Days means to Lethbridge and our economy.
We feel for the community. There's key things in society that are important. Food and shelter are important. Connectivity with your fellow residents is important, and that's one thing that we've always provided in the community, is that great social gathering place.
No social gatherings means more to the community than missing out on their favorite foods or musical act. No whoop-up days means a significant loss for Lethbridge's economy.
We can say that it will be substantial, as again, it is one of the largest events that Lethbridge does bring in, and it's quite unfortunate. But the one thing that we would suggest for people is to stay home today so we can continue to travel tomorrow.
Lethbridge's Economic Recovery Task Force surveyed over 250 businesses in southern Alberta. Of those respondents, 51% say that they've reduced their staff. 78% say they've seen a reduction in sales, and 41% say they can survive no more than 3 months in the current climate without additional support.
It's just going to continue to hurt hotels and restaurants and other businesses. So, the impacts will continue through the summer, even if we do see some of those restrictions lifted in other areas or other businesses are able to reopen. The impacts from large events and gatherings being canceled is going to bite, I think.
This will affect a number of people. It'll affect restaurants. It'll affect retailers. It'll affect the other tourism attractions. It prevents people from being able to flow.
Whoop Up Days Festival has been around for 123 years, and the only time it's ever been canceled was for World War I and II. Exhibition Park is hoping that next year it can continue to carry on one of Southern Alberta's oldest traditions. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
The City of Lethbridge announced today that there will not be any Canada Day festivities because of the coronavirus. Officials are encouraging us to enjoy Canada Day at home with our immediate family in our backyards. Ottawa announced rent relief for small businesses that have been forced to close due to the coronavirus. The federal government help is expected to lower rent by 75% for affected small businesses. It will be provided in partnership with the provinces and territories which have jurisdiction over rents. As BCN's Loris Alexander explains, this is welcome news for small business owners.
As many as half of Canada's independent restaurants could permanently shut down due to the coronavirus pandemic, according to Restaurants Canada.
It's not the same. We have problems now. It's hard to pay the bills.
Due to COVID-19, we had to close all the restaurants. So we closed all my 3 locations and asked staff to stay at home and be safe. So right now we are basically closed.
A small business clothing store has the same concerns.
I'm pretty worried about my business right now. Just for the past 3 weeks, like staying home and almost a month now, I'm really struggling and depressed. It's because what if this pandemic is not gonna be end soon?
Today, Trudeau unveiled 75% rent relief for small businesses hit by the pandemic, and it's a relief for these business owners.
That's a great move. I think government has done a great job to do these things. There is a little bit of partnership there. I'm paying 25%, landlord is paying 25%, and the government paying 50%, which is a great move. So I applaud for that for sure.
Oh, it's great. When I hear, oh my goodness, yes, I love Trudeau. because we need it.
That 75% that the government helping us as a small business, it's really helped us a lot because we can still pay some other expenses that we have.
Despite the circumstances, these entrepreneurs are hopeful for a fresh start and a brighter future.
Please, the small business is hard for everyone to keep open. This is a familiar business.
We have always got support, but this times we need more is because we need to reset, we need to restart. Everything is starting from the scratch for all of us, and we need to get over. But I think Lethbridge will come up get better idea for sure. We will support each other.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Farming today can be challenging at the best of times. Add into the mix the coronavirus and an increase in a federal carbon tax, and it makes things even tougher for farmers. BCN's Micah Quinn caught up with one farmer near Mosley, Alberta, who discusses how he and his family are trying to survive during these difficult times.
Ian Donovan is a grain farmer and owns a farm near Mosley, where his two sons help him. He says there are uncertain times ahead for farmers because of COVID-19.
I think we're seeing more people talking about their mental health more than ever, especially in agriculture, because, you know, the stressful times and the costs, everything, and, you know, it's, we have literally $1 million going into the ground every spring, and you kind of hope something comes back out of it. So it's one more layer. The uncertainty of the markets is the biggest thing.
Donovan says that neighbors are feeling the stress of COVID-19 in their daily lives.
I have one neighbor, friend of mine, that I don't think the guy has ever been in a grocery store in probably 35 years since he's been married, because his wife kind of always takes care of that for him. And, you know, she got stressed out, had a little anxiety attack the other day when they went to town, because she went to town to go get groceries and seeing everybody with masks and gloves on, and it's starting to weigh on lots of people.
With the federal carbon tax being imposed on Alberta, Donovan says there is a trickle-down effect for the farming industry as a whole.
It's all the extra costs that are incurred that when we already have a very fragile bottom line now that's very suspect on whether you're making money or not. So it literally every dollar counts.
Another issue that is top of mind for Donovan is the need for more rain for the upcoming seeding season.
The last couple of years we've only gotten 2 to 4 inches of rain total in the year, and we need, you know, upwards to 12 to 18 inches to refill the fuel tank, so to speak. So
Donovan says that seeding season will begin next week and that his hours could go from early mornings all the way up to 10 or 11 p.m. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The First Nations teenager who was charged in the shooting of a German tourist 2 years ago, 55 kilometers outside of Calgary, was sentenced to 21 months. Horst Stewin suffered life-altering injuries after being shot in the head when he and his family were driving in an SUV along a highway west of Calgary. The teen who shot Stewin cannot be identified since he was just 16 at the time of the incident. The teenager was released from custody for time already served. The judge told the now 18-year-old from the Stoney Nakoda First Nation to get support from his family and to work with an elder in his community. RCMP and Nova Scotia have released more details into the killer's rampage across the province last weekend, which left 23 people dead, including the shooter. Police say the killer, Gabriel Wortman, assaulted a woman with whom he had been in a long-term relationship.
So what we've learned as part of the investigation is that on April 18th, before the first 911 call was received, there was an assault between the gunman and a person known to him. This assault occurred in the area of Portapique. The victim managed to escape from the gunman, and she hid overnight in the woods. Following this, police received its first 911 call with a report of a shooting at a home in the area. It was only after 6:30 in the morning or daybreak when a victim emerged from hiding after she had called 911. Our officers responded, and it was at that time that through that significant key witness, we confirmed more details about Gabriel Wortman.
The province announced today that there were 297 new cases of the novel coronavirus, bringing the total number to 4,017 in Alberta. 3 are First Nations in the Calgary zone. Government officials are now investigating 2 new cases as well at the Mountain View Poultry Facility near Okotoks. Officials say 1,397 people have recovered from the virus. There were also 5 new deaths, bringing the total number to 72 in Alberta. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Henshaw, says many Albertans are upset that the province has cancelled summer events, but she says it's a necessary move.
I have heard from many Albertans who are profoundly disappointed or even angry about my statement regarding summer events. The message I am hearing is that Albertans have sacrificed so much already. How can I ask them to give up their summer when we don't know for sure what the situation will be like in 1 or 2 months? I hear this loud and clear, and the question of how we came to the decision regarding summer events is a valid one. So today I would like to provide more information on why I am convinced this measure is necessary. First, I know the curve shown in our modeling work may have left the impression that the virus will go away over the summer. That is not the case. The virus that causes COVID-19 will be with us for many months to come.
When it comes to our energy sector, Ottawa needs to do more than just help clean up old oil wells. That's according to Lethbridge Tory MP Rachel Harder. She says our energy sector is the lifeblood of the Alberta economy, and the Trudeau Liberals must do a better job supporting it.
We know that it is the leading export from our nation, and we know that it is the #1 private sector investor. Oil and gas is largely the reason why we're able to move forward with new schools and new hospitals and roads and bridges and other recreational infrastructure that we all enjoy.
Catch the full interview with Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our show. Organizations that represent wheat and barley growers want Ottawa to continue crop research despite the COVID-19 pandemic. The Canadian Wheat Research Coalition and the Canadian Barley Research Coalition include growers in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. They say urgent action is required to save field, lab, and greenhouse activity this year. They say such research is critical to the competitiveness of our country's agriculture industry. The Canadian Pork Council has made a public plea for government support in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. The group claims the industry is on pace to lose around $675 million this year. Hog producers across Western Canada say the coronavirus has pushed the pork industry into a free fall. Andrew Dixon, the general manager of Manitoba Pork, says product backlogs will not be cleared up until restaurants and bars can open up again. It appears as though more meat processing plants are being hit by COVID-19. First, Cargill Meats outside of Calgary was temporarily shut down. JBS in Brooks is dealing with a coronavirus outbreak. And now Superior Poultry Processors in Vancouver may also be hit. BC Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says the processor is the sister of United Poultry, where 29 workers have already tested positive for the virus.
We have another community outbreak. This again is in a poultry plant, the Superior Poultry Plant in Coquitlam, where 2 cases have been identified as positive so far, but there is an ongoing investigation that is happening as of yesterday when the first case was identified. So ongoing investigation and testing by Fraser Health. This is a sister plant to the United Poultry outbreak that had been announced earlier this week. And there continues to be an investigation at that plant with 29 people identified as COVID-19 positive associated with that outbreak.
Shoppers south of the border could soon see a shortage of meat, as the coronavirus is also affecting meat processing plants in the United States.
We're doing the very best we can to keep pigs moving to market. The middle link of that chain is broken right now. So we're sitting on pigs we don't know where to go with, and you may go to your grocery store and not see pork on the shelf. There's this huge glut of pigs with nowhere to go. So everyone is focused on getting it into a plant, and no one is, their pricing isn't even being talked about that much. There will be farms, multi-generational farms, that are going to go out of business over this.
This is really a punch in the gut for a lot of our farmers. There will be times when shoppers will see shortages or things that aren't on the shelf. That doesn't mean we're short the product. We don't want people to panic. And sometimes it's just a matter of moving the product from one place to another.
People in Toronto gathered yesterday to remember those who lost their lives in a deadly van attack 2 years ago. 10 people were killed and 16 others were injured during the violent attack. Toronto Mayor John Tory says people should not be broken by such violent acts, and the heroes who responded to the tragedy should be celebrated.
The pain of that awful day continues to be felt by everyone who loves this city. There was a terrible loss of life that day. There were life-changing injuries, and there was, in a certain way, a loss of innocence for the city itself. But there were also heroes that day, men and women who ran towards the danger to help, to comfort people, sometimes in their final moments, and indeed to save lives.
An apparent tornado killed 3 people and injured at least 20 others in and around a southeast Texas town. Polk County officials say more than 40 homes were also destroyed.
Suddenly it got dark, the wind picked up, and within minutes I was shouting, "Take cover, take cover." We got into our bathroom and stood there for probably 30, 45 seconds. Sounded like a train, like they say. And we heard crashes, snaps, and as soon as I opened my door, all I could say was, "Oh my God."
Incredible images coming from Texas. Weather-wise here in southwestern Alberta, it's feeling more like summer as opposed to spring as the mercury continues to climb even into the weekend. Full weather details are coming up shortly. It was a beautiful TGIF and a nice weekend is shaping up weather-wise. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a look at the forecast. Jeanette, it may be a good time to finally bring out our bikes for a ride. Bicycles, that is.
Yeah, biking would actually be a really great idea this weekend, Hal, because it is supposed to be a beautiful weekend. Now, we did have a chance of some showers today, but that didn't happen. Tonight, though, we're going to see some clouds and a low of 3 degrees with a westerly wind gusting to 50 km. And into tomorrow, we are going to be seeing some sunny skies on Saturday. There could be some increasing clouds later on in the day, though. The high is 17 degrees, and then an overnight low on Saturday night of 5 degrees. And by the way, the UV index is 6 or higher. And then looking ahead to Sunday, we're going to be seeing sunny skies as well with a high of 16 degrees, high of 18 on Monday and high of 19 on Tuesday. Beautiful sunny skies for those 3 days. We could see some scattered clouds on Wednesday and Thursday with highs of 21 and 24 degrees for those days as we finally reach those 20-degree marks. Very exciting, especially for this time of year. It's actually going to be feeling more like summer instead of spring. Average highs for this time of year, 15 degrees, average lows 1. The high temperature on this day was back in 1977. It was 27 degrees, and the lowest temperature was -10 in 1959. The sun rose at 6:21 a.m. and the Friday evening sunset 8:38 p.m. So let's take a look at what Saturday is going to be shaping up like across the nation. In Victoria and Vancouver, we're seeing a chance of showers over there with highs of 13, 14 degrees in those cities. 19 degrees is expected in Edmonton and 17 in Calgary. Should be lovely sunny skies across Alberta tomorrow. Same thing for Saskatchewan, high of 18 in Saskatoon, 17 is the high in Regina. Over in Winnipeg, a high of 13 degrees. They could see some increasing clouds and also a chance of showers there. Now, as we push further east and take a look at what's happening in Toronto, we're seeing lots of sunshine over there with a high of 12 degrees, 12 also expected in Ottawa and Montreal, so pretty even temperatures across that region with lots of sunshine as well. And then as we look further into the Maritimes, we're going to be taking a look at Fredericton. Also some sunshine there expected with a high of 10 degrees. 7 expected in Charlottetown, also with lots of sunshine. A bit of clouds in Halifax is expected tomorrow with a high of 11. St. John's, Newfoundland, they're getting kind of the icky weather of the country. They could see a chance of flurries mixed with showers, a high of only 2 degrees there. There you go, that is your Saturday forecast.
The province says today that the $1 billion being used for site rehabilitation around orphaned wells will help create 5,300 new jobs for Albertans. Government officials say the program will also create indirect employment, which will support our restaurant and hotel workers as our economy slowly begins to reopen and recover from the effects of COVID-19. Alberta Energy Minister Sonia Savage said Alberta's energy industry is the largest subsector of Canada's economy and one of its biggest job creators. She says the work being done will ensure that sites are being properly addressed, benefiting landowners and Albertans across the province. The oil and gas sector was recently promised $1 billion to help clean up abandoned oil wells, but is it enough? David Yeager is an energy policy analyst, and he says it's a good start, but really, what is next for a hard-hit energy sector?
The question is what to do next. And so what the collective governments in the world have done is put the whole world economy into uncharted territory. Nothing like this has ever happened before, including oil prices going negative. So it's now what? So the point is there will be government assistance. Nobody's concerned about the deficit. The government will step in. It's the only source of funds at this time is the Bank of Canada and printing money. But the question is who gets what and how.
Mr. Yeager will have more on how the energy sector will try and rebuild its industry. That's coming up after Business News. The federal government says it has paid out $22.4 billion in emergency aid for those who have lost their jobs due to the economic fallout of COVID-19. It says there have been just over 7 million applicants for the $2,000 a month Canada Emergency Response Benefit. 4 programs unveiled recently to help Canadians are under scrutiny by Parliament's budget watchdog. Yves Giroux says a $25 billion loan program for businesses will likely cost federal coffers just over $1 billion through a combination of interest costs, defaults, and loan forgiveness. The company that brings live shows ranging from Disney on Ice to monster trucks has laid off nearly 1,500 workers because of the coronavirus pandemic. Florida-based Felt Entertainment says prohibitions against mass gatherings have forced it to suspend its tours indefinitely. The workers laid off include 325 skaters, technicians, wardrobe workers, and special effects coordinators. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 169 points in the day to finish the day at 14,420. The Dow was up 260 to 23,775. The S&P 500 was up 38 points to 2836, and the Nasdaq was up 139 points to 8634. Oil was up 64 cents to $17.14 per barrel. Natural gas was down 10 cents to $1.71. Gold was down 91 cents to $17.2960 an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $15.25 an ounce. Wheat is at $245 per metric ton, barley's at $238, canola's at $454, and corn is at $238 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 30 cents to $82.63, feeder cattle were up 18 cents to $117.45, and lean hogs were down 10 cents to $51.53. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to $70.94 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Whoop Up Days Family Festival in Lethbridge has been officially cancelled for this year. The province announced that large gatherings with more than 15 people is still prohibited during the COVID-19 pandemic. That includes large events like Whoop Up Days. Exhibition Park CEO Rudy Friesens says it's tough that the event had to be cancelled, but it's in the best interest for the health and safety of residents in our community. The COVID-19 pandemic is impacting many of us here in southern Alberta. Up next, BCN's Jeanette Rocher chats with Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder about how devastating the coronavirus has been to our economy. That interview is coming up.
Well, every day in Canada, there's an update on COVID-19 cases and its effect on our economy, the latest health research, and the latest government assistance. It can be overwhelming. Joining me to discuss the government side of things is Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. It's so good to be here with you.
Yes. Okay, so let's get right to it. So there was a debate this past while over how often Parliament should meet in person and also virtually. Can you comment on this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, as parliamentarians, we're used to meeting in the House of Commons with 338 of us in order to discuss the things that matter most to Canadians. And we made an agreement in mid-March that we would break until April 20th. And in order to give attention to our ridings and really focus on the pandemic and responding locally. That said, April 20th came and we had to make a decision as to whether or not the House would resume. And as Conservatives, we really felt that it was important actually for the House to go back into session in a reduced capacity, so there would be fewer MPs in the House, so that we could respect social distancing and make sure that we did it in with the greatest degree of safety as possible. And but we felt that it was really important to be there, to be able to ask the government important questions, to be able to stand up for Canadians, to advocate for what is in the public's best interest. Unfortunately, other parties did not agree with us. And so at the end of the day, what was settled upon was that we would do 2 virtual sittings per week and 1 in-house sitting per week. Now that said, interestingly enough, the House of Commons has come back and said, actually, it's going to be about a month till about mid-May before they're actually ready to do those virtual sittings, which is unfortunate for the Canadian public.
Wow. Okay, so during one of these debates last month, the Liberals proposed a bill to spend $82 billion in COVID-19 aid, which also would have given them the unchecked power to raise taxes, debt, and spending without parliamentary approval until 2022. So what is your take on this?
Yeah, so in this process, during the time that the House wasn't sitting, the Liberals put forward a piece of legislation that would allow them to spend money, put benefits forward for Canadians who are suffering because of COVID. So fair enough. However, what was unfair was the fact that they tried to sneak into this bill unilateral power to tax and spend, and they would have had the ability to do so until basically 2022. Now, Conservatives did due diligence and looked over the bill, and we found this and called them out on it. And so, of course, they were not appreciative of that, but we believe that it's in the best interest of Canadians to hold the government to account and to make sure that any spending that takes place does, in fact, have to go through Parliament. That is what it is to be a part of a democracy, is that the government doesn't get unilateral power. They don't get to act as a dictatorship. And so, at the end of the day, they did back off. And that said, they do have significant spending power until the end of June. And then that will be reassessed based on where we're at with this pandemic going forward.
Right. Let's move on to the WHO. Should Canada be reducing its dependence on the World Health Organization when it comes to making health decisions? The WHO was slow to declare COVID-19 as a global pandemic, and as a result, Canada was slow to close our borders to international travel. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, an excellent question, and certainly the one that many Canadians are pondering right now. The World Health Organization provided us with some really inaccurate information early on. So originally they told us that COVID-19 couldn't be transmitted from person to person. Well, we found out that that was false. They also said that masks wouldn't do anything to help the spread. Well, now people are very much encouraged to wear a mask. So there's been a flip-flop on information, which I think certainly produces an element of distrust within the Canadian public, and I would even say around the globe, in terms of the World Health Organization and the information that we're getting from them. At the end of the day, Canadians really need to have a voice on this, and they really need to be heard. So I would encourage them actually to reach out to the minister, the public safety minister, and to have their voices heard. And I think at the end of the day, we really need to hear back from them and then make a decision going forward. But the World Health Organization needs to be held accountable for the decisions that were made.
Right. Now, speaking of health, does Canada need to take serious steps to being self-sufficient for our pharmaceuticals, medical and personal protective equipment supplies? What do you think?
Yeah, so, normally Canada would have quite the stockpile put away for an emergency situation like this. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was actually a lot of our warehouses were cleared out in 2019, and to our knowledge, they weren't restocked. So then when a pandemic hits, as it has, we're in trouble. And not only that, but also, as you know, the federal government made the decision to send a ton of our PPE over to China earlier this year. So at the end of the day, the well-being of another country was put before our own. Look, I believe that it is the basic and most fundamental responsibility of the federal government to put the safety and security of Canadians first. And unfortunately, Justin Trudeau did not do that.
This pandemic has also really hit the agriculture sector hard. We're hearing of raw milk being dumped and the closure of meat processing plants. Some farmers are saying if they don't have some government backup guarantees, they're not going to risk planting a crop this year. So, Rachel, what are you hearing from Lethbridge area producers, and what does the federal government need to do to help the ag sector?
It's an excellent question, and I really appreciate that you're asking about our agricultural producers. They are absolutely vital to our well-being. We're talking about the men and women who work incredibly hard to make sure that we have food on our tables. I've had the opportunity to talk with many of the producers in the Lethbridge area, and what I'm hearing back from them is they need the federal government to step up and provide provide financial backing for them to be able to move forward with confidence. Without that confidence, we could be risking our food security. So farmers may make the decision not to put crops in the field. And certainly those who have cattle or who have pork or chicken, they're also facing plant shutdowns. And so that means that, they're stuck with live animals and having to incur the cost of feeding them, but they don't actually have a market. At the same time, for Canadians, it means that we don't have food on our tables. That's a really unfortunate place to be. And as I said, farmers need the government to come forward and to really help them out in this time.
Yeah, it's a tough time for everybody, including the energy sector right now. So Alberta is getting hammered as oil prices dropped into negative territory for the first time ever. The Liberals did offer a financial aid package with $1.7 billion towards cleaning up abandoned oil and gas wells, and then another $750 million to cut methane emissions, plus expanded credit lines for smaller oil companies. And is that going to be enough, do you think?
Another very important question. The energy sector is super important to the Canadian economy. We know that it is the leading export from our nation, and we know that it is the #1 private sector investor. Oil and gas is largely the reason why we're able to move forward with new schools and new hospitals and roads and bridges and other recreational infrastructure that we all enjoy. And so when that industry suffers, we all suffer. Not to mention, look, there are still cars on the road. There are still homes that need to be heated. There are businesses that need to be heated. We still have to function in our daily lives, which means that we rely on oil and gas. Well, Canada produces the most ethical and environmentally friendly oil and gas products. And so at the end of the day, this industry needs the support of the federal government. And unfortunately, Justin Trudeau and his cabinet are just not coming to the table with anything sufficient. As a result, Canada is hurting and will continue to hurt for quite some time. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that the Prime Minister is more interested in supporting a regime like Saudi Arabia, where they have no human rights records and fail to take care of the environment. Meanwhile, he's able to I think even excited perhaps to let Canada suffer. That's not okay. That's not leadership. That's not a prime minister who believes in the well-being of his country and its future. Look, at the end of the day, there were some really solid steps that could have been taken. Number 1, scrap Bill C-69. Number 2, scrap Bill C-48. Number 3, remove the vast majority of regulatory burdens. Many of them don't need to be there. Get projects approved and let's get going.
Yeah, well, there's no question about it that individuals and businesses are needing government help right now. But this can't continue forever, obviously. At some point, the economy does need to reopen, and the debt is going to be enormous, like you said. A number of provinces are considering lifting some restrictions and reopening their economies as early as May. Do you think that this is a good idea?
I think Canada is a really unique country in the sense that we're set up as a confederation, which means provinces have a lot of sovereignty within themselves. So I trust the premiers of the provinces to make the decision that is best for them. Ultimately, Justin Trudeau is going to lead the country in a direction that he sees best at that national level. But it really is up to each province to determine what is happening within its borders. So for example, a province like Saskatchewan that only has 1.2 million people within it is probably going to be able to bounce back quite a bit quicker than, let's say, a province like Ontario. And so, again, I would say, we probably need to take a step back and allow premiers to make the decision that is best. And of course, that decision needs to be responsible. Of course, that decision needs to make sure that we're looking out for the safety and the well-being of Canadian citizens. And definitely the most vulnerable, including seniors and those who are compromised within their health, they need to be looked after. And so decisions do need to be made that take that into account.
Mm-hmm. What steps would you like to see the government take towards an exit plan to set a realistic path towards economic recovery?
Yeah, it's, again, an excellent question. And these are the questions that we should be answering. The Prime Minister gets out there every single day in front of his little cottage and he answers questions, or sort of. And when he offers his reflections, one of the things that he's been really clear on is he said, we're not even going to talk about it. We're not even going to talk about it. Well, that's wrong. That is a lack of leadership for this country, and Canadians deserve better. Why aren't we talking about it? Because if we bring ideas to the table, if we engage in productive dialogue, if we have an informed conversation, we can move forward in a responsible manner and protect the most vulnerable within Canada while simultaneously getting our markets back up and running and allowing people to earn a living once again. It is just basic human dignity that we would have the conversation and put a strategic plan in place and start moving forward slowly towards opening up our economy again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a number of countries are pondering the idea of immunity certificates, almost like a passport that would allow those who have tested positive for antibodies to COVID-19 to return to work or to board an airplane, while those without immunity would need to follow restrictions until vaccines become available. Should Canada, in your opinion, do something similar to this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. The fact that you would be able to test for antibodies and then give people a certificate that would allow them to go back to work. Some people have proposed that having this certificate would almost be like kryptonite. You're able to go back into those sectors such as healthcare and frontline work, and do so with great confidence, knowing that you're not going to get COVID-19, nor are you going to transmit it to someone else. I think it's a really unique idea. I think it's one that should absolutely be considered. And again, this is one of the reasons why we should be having conversations. And for the Prime Minister to shut down that possibility is wrong.
And then, of course, while the world grapples with the coronavirus pandemic, China has been arresting pro-democracy leaders all across Hong Kong. How should Canada be responding to this?
Yeah, I find it interesting that the Prime Minister he refuses to condemn anything that China does. We're looking at a country with grave human rights records. We're looking at a country that functions as a dictatorship for all intents and purposes, and it's wrong. It's wrong. And so, what is happening within Hong Kong right now, and shutting down any demonstration of pro-democracy, or any demonstration that is pro-democracy, I just think that is absolutely wrong. And why wouldn't our Prime Minister stand up for democracy, stand up for human rights, stand up for freedom?
Absolutely. And then finally, Rachel, Canada has experienced its worst ever mass shooting that took place in Nova Scotia this past week. Any thoughts on this tragedy?
Yeah, Jenna, it's just so sad. It is so sad. A very senseless tragedy. Many lives lost, and I think sometimes we get lost in the number. And I think what's really important right now is actually for the Canadian public to understand that these are individuals with stories. These are individuals who touched the lives of many others, whether it was because they were a teacher or a nurse or a community volunteer. And so these are women and men who made incredible contributions, and they had families and loved ones, and those individuals got left behind and are now in this place of tremendous grief and turmoil. And as Canadians, I believe it's our responsibility to stand in solidarity with them. And certainly, as a member of Parliament, my heart is joined with them, and they're definitely in my prayers going forward.
Such a sad tragedy. Thank you for your thoughts on that, Rachel. And thank you for joining us too today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to be here with you.
That was Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder.
The energy sector is still reeling as the price of oil dipped into negative territory. It has devastated our economy in Alberta and a lot of Canada. David Yeager is an energy policy analyst and author of the new book, From Miracle to Menace, Alberta, a Carbon Story. He also recently wrote an interesting article entitled COVID-19 Will Greatly Reduce Support for the Anti-Oil Movement. David, welcome back to BCN.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Now, you write about how the climate change and anti-oil movement started and how the power of social media, and politicians have really contributed to this. Can you explain in further detail, remembering that Bridge City News is not mainstream media?
No, but it is really a high water phenomenon. The most interesting book I read was called The Progress Paradox in 2003. And it was, how come when the world keeps getting better, everybody thinks it's getting worse? It's like human nature. But his comment was, Western society has been so successful, in part because of fossil fuels, that people had the luxury of being able to worry about how they felt. The basic necessities of food, shelter, clothing, and income were taken care of. So it was a society based on feelings and moods. So it's into this very successful society that you introduce climate change. What will the weather be like in the year 2050 or will 2100? And if you are, looking under rocks for food or you're working two jobs to pay the rent, this is really, really first world issues. And so we've been most of this century, things have been going well. The society's been good. People have had jobs. People have had income. They could worry about less pressing things than the necessities of life, and that has all changed in the last 60 days. People are locked in the house, losing their jobs. The layoffs are huge, and so I'm just thinking that in the end, all the attention politically paid to climate change was successful because there was a lot of voter support because everything else was taken care of. So my question is, in the last election, for example, in the article, I pointed out that 29% of the people thought that climate change was a major issue. I'd like to run that poll again in July and say, what is your major issue, and see if it even registers. So politics tends to go where the votes are. This is where the votes have been. My thesis is they will not be there in the immediate future for all the reasons we're starting to learn as we live through our lives in this horrid mess.
Now, you say that people are really easy to scare. Sometimes we rely on too much on big government and forget how wealth is actually created.
Well, that's been the history of end of the world phenomena. If you know what to look for, if you go back to even Malthus in the 1700s, after the printing press was invented, he was figured there was more people than there was food, and we were all going to die. Then it was Silent Spring in the early 60s with DDT, pesticides, we were all going to die. Then there was the population bomb and Paul Ehrlich in 1986. We were all going to die. And then the Club of Rome, we were going to run out of resources in the 1970s. And so there's a recurring phenomena through here, is it's almost a default element of human nature, is if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And so maybe it's in our DNA that we're actually worried about things like this. But so I guess we are easy to scare. And the COVID is a perfect example. 99.95% of the people of Alberta have not tested positive, and yet nobody will go near anybody. So perhaps it's human nature, perhaps it's overemphasized. But yeah, this is getting people to worry about what's going to happen next. It appears to be quite easy.
You know, a lot of Canadians are being reminded, David, of what it takes to have a good economy. Alberta is getting hammered right now, as we talked about earlier. Oil prices in negative territory for the first time ever. The Liberals did offer a financial aid package, $1.7 billion towards cleaning up the abandoned oil and gas wells, another $750 million to cut methane emissions, plus some expanded credit lines for smaller companies. But how much of this will really help?
Well, it can't hurt. I'm just actually researching that right now, trying to understand how bad it is. There's nobody making money unless you've got your production hedged, which is forward sold. You cannot produce barrel oil profitably at these prices. So everybody is hemorrhaging cash and cutting their capital programs. So you can't do too much assistance. You provide too much assistance at this time. The real issue has been, is this sufficient? And that's what people are worried about. I mean, the fact is, the government, it's a lot easier to respond to the COVID situation than it is to understand what you've done. Like, we have to quit moving, ground airlines, strand cruise ships, put yellow tape around the swing set at the playground so the kids can't come in contact with each other. Shutting down and locking down the economy is really quite easy, for all the various levels of politicians to sound concerned and have the police go around and give away tickets. The question is what to do next. And so what the collective governments in the world have done is put the whole world economy into uncharted territory. Nothing like this has ever happened before, including oil prices going negative. So it's now what? So the point is there will be government assistance. Nobody's concerned about the deficit. The government will step in. It's the only source of funds at this time is the Bank of Canada and printing money. But the question is who gets what and how. So the thing is, the politicians today are much more able to recognize a problem and tell you what to do than they are to fix it. Just like climate change. We should quit using fossil fuels. Oh, good idea. Now what? Well, that's a little more complicated. So again, telling everybody nobody moves, nobody gets hurt, shutting down the economy, that was relatively easy compared to what it's going to take to prevent it from collapsing completely and bringing it back.
So, David, why is it that the Liberal Party is so hesitant to provide a major financial bailout to the energy sector like they did previously with the auto industry?
I think it's a lot more. There's two elements. One is there's the politics, in the sense that this is a party, a fairly polarized party on the subject of oil and climate change. They won the election in part on anti-oil climate policy. And so it's not intuitive that they should help these people. I would say that this particular government is not particularly gifted in the area of economic management. If you look at this particular crop, it's a tough time to have people with this little economic bench strength, if you will. The second thing is and this is in all fairness to the current governments at all levels, this is unprecedented. No one has ever dealt with anything like this. And so what do we do? I do know that the conversations between the Minister of Energy and the industry have been continuous with finance and the banks. Like, they know they have to do something, and they are asking for guidance on what to do. The question is what to do. So everybody, it's sort of like COVID. It's easy to say what not to do. I mean, say we need help. The government never said we don't need help. You're the only source of funds. The government has said they've never admitted that there's another source of funds. Check out your mattress, clean out your mattress. That's already been done. The question is, what do we give to who? So what I'm hoping is that as the gravity of the situation becomes more apparent, particularly at the federal level, what I'm hoping is they'll take tribal partisan politics. A lot of politics in the modern era, the reason people are so jaded about politics and politicians is they're more inclined to worry about keeping their job than doing their job. What I'm hoping is the current situation is so severe that it's time to start thinking about what's best for the country, not the next election. And I in phoning around, I think they're coming around to that. I sure hope so.
What's interesting too, David, is how many people are out there saying that they want to see the energy sector just die. Oil and gas just go away completely. Yet how many Canadians are aware that essential elements of personal protective equipment, life-sustaining equipment, right, like the gloves, masks, respirators, are all petroleum-based products, even the hand sanitizer?
There's an incredible energy knowledge and energy product information vacuum that has emerged. There was the idea that has been put forward, and really many don't believe otherwise, that all we need to do to replace oil and gas with wind and solar is political will. I mean, people communicate with each other on the way to the pipeline protest with a plastic phone. There's really no understanding of the supply chain, nor has there been any need to understand the supply chain. This goes back to what I was talking about, the progress paradox. Things are going well. Why do I have to worry about where things come from? I never run out of anything. There's been no shortages of anything. If I don't have a job, you got a guaranteed income supplement, like the ability to book off and go chase how you feel instead of how you got here or how you're going to stay here. It's been fantastic. I mean, that's one of the things the author, Alec Epstein, concluded. He says, I suppose if society's gotten to the point where the only thing they have to worry about is whether they're happy or not, he says, I suppose that's progress, and it is. So there's a giant. This goes back to the original question you asked me when we started this interview. There's a big reality check coming, as people have more time stuck in the house. What is it? And so that people have time to listen to other narratives now. Where will my next job come from? And I'd say that right now, if the oil and gas industry could get back to work, and people started to want to hire people, I can't imagine anyone's going to say, well, no, we'd rather you stayed at home. I mean, these jobs are going to be critical to the recovery of the Canadian economy.
It appears that some of the anti-oil support is coming from the younger generation, those people who grew up watching Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. Will this change their mindset from the idea that the mission of climate salvation is more important than the economy? Do you think that reality is maybe setting in for some people right now?
This is the first time they've had tough times, and why? I think this is the great question. Why is it? Why have I lost my job? Why has the price of oil collapsed? Yes, this is the fundamental change in your life and in your future, that the shock treatment, I think, that people have been wondering, is this what we have to do? Do we have to starve everybody out to get their attention? Well, it's underway, whether we had to or not, whether it was intentional or unintentional. This is going to be a great learning moment for the generation that's really had more esoteric things to worry about. So I'm inclined to agree with everything you said. Yeah, you're going to learn where plastic comes from when you can't get it. You're going to, and so on and so forth. You're going to learn how important the oil jobs are because they don't exist anymore. And so as the deficit goes up, and it's all that's why I say I think what's happened is that the state of the economy, or the changes in the economy that this shutdown has created, is much greater than people's understanding of just what we've done here and how long it's going to take to turn it around. But that's happening at lightning speed, unfortunately, as more people lose their jobs and their savings.
So once the COVID-19 pandemic is passed and things return to some kind of normal, will the anti-oil movement go right back to pressuring governments to spend billions upon billions of dollars to shut down the fossil fuel industry and replace it with renewable energy?
There's two elements to this. There's the professional environmentalists that they do this for a living, and they're always looking from one crusade. If you go back in the book, I went back, the history of Greenpeace was in saving the whales and nuclear testing. You know, it's the issue of the day. If it isn't fossil fuels, they'll find another one, and they'll morph because that's their jobs. The question is how is this going to resonate with the voters? It's not so much that there's always going to be an environmental movement. There always will be. There'll always be people that in this area advising us what not to do. The question is will politicians, in their hunt for votes, will this crystallize itself in voter support? That's what's happened with the climate change movement, is there's been discernible pools of voters emerge, and people have identified them. The Green Party, for example, Elizabeth May, she won more seats than ever on a platform to shut down the oil sands. Obviously, she didn't have any candidates in Fort McMurray. The Liberal Party has identified a loyal group of voters among the climate concerned. The question is not so much will there be pressure for them to worry about climate change from the environmentalists. That's one thing. The question is, will there be the voter support at the polls? That's my thesis. My thesis is that what the voters of Canada want the government to do next, that is what has changed.
Can you comment on the push for renewable energy and the goal we keep hearing, net zero emissions by the year 2030 or 2050? Is that realistic?
It's easier to say than do. I've talked to a lot of people or read a lot of material. Equinor is the old Statoil out of Norway, and they have adopted and of course Norway's thought as being uber green, and they have said, well, we're net zero by 2050. So then you have to go back and say, well, that's nice. Well, I tend to peel back the onion and read the story below the headline. And what they called that was a wonderful opportunity for research and development. Meaning we actually don't know how we're going to do it yet, and we're going to have to develop the means to do it. So the commitment is one thing, the means is unknown, and so there's no one has explained to my satisfaction how they're going to go net zero by 2050. It's just the path of least resistance has been the path of least resistance is just say you're going to do it and buy yourself a little fresh air. And 20 years, of course, that's or 30 years. The beauty of those who commit to net zero by 2050 today is 30 years out. They certainly, if they're not dead, they certainly won't be in the jobs they're in when they made the commitment. But no, I would say that the whole world is going to rethink this, is going to look at their priorities now. I mean, this is not just confined to Canada. This is happening all over Europe, all over the Western world. There's 7.5 billion people on Earth that are being impoverished in some way at the present time. That is the people to ask, not Greenpeace or not Justin Trudeau, what they think. What do the people of the world think? And this is a reset, I think, of priorities back to the basics.
David, we got 30 seconds left here. Quickly, what is your overall outlook for the Alberta energy industry?
We're not going away anytime soon. The one thing about low oil prices is they really have put an arrow through the heart of the renewables. Renewables need higher oil prices, not lower oil prices. I believe that oil is going to be around for a long time. We got a lot of it. We're going to make a big comeback. I just can't tell you exactly when.
Okay, thanks so much, David. David Yeager, energy policy analyst and author of From Miracle to Menace, Alberta, a Carbon Story. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.